Good afternoon. This is Sukjong Lee at Sangkyungan University. Actually, I have a cold, so in the middle of moderating this session, if I just cough, just allow me. And second, I'm not a climate change expert, but I'm studying disinformation as part of my democracy research. I think that's why they invited me to moderate this session. This AI is amazing technology that can help our life and also that can destroy our life. So it applies to climate change as well. AI can help those people who like to deny climate change and also who want to delay the climate change policy. And since we are living in this hot weather changing, I think it's very difficult to deny climate change. So therefore, these days, the AI disinformation on climate change, they usually say it's impossible to respond to climate change, so let's give up. Or some companies are doing greenwashing, pretending they are contributing to climate change. And also people are using AI to discredit politicians or scientists working on climate change. So I think this session, we have two eminent speakers who can address these issues. So let me introduce Professor Novi Kurnia. She's an associate professor at University of Gajah Mada in Indonesia. She teaches digital literacy, gender, and media, and also she's activist. So she's a co-founder and national coordinator of Indonesian Digital Literacy Activist Network, and served as the Indonesian National Digital Literacy Movement. That's amazing. And she also presented her finding in the climate-related myths or disinformation at UNESCO lately. And our second speaker is Mr. Daniel Castro, and he is a vice president of the Information Technology and Innovation Foundation, ITIF, and he directs the ITIF as a Center for Data Innovation. And he's widely cited his work on information technology and internet policy, including privacy, security, intellectual property, and internet governance. And he is a former IT analyst at the Government Accountability Office, and also he was appointed to the Commerce Data Advisory Council in the past. So I will ask each speaker to speak about 20 minutes respectively, and then we'll just have 30 minutes around the table. So without further ado, let me invite Professor Novi Kurnia to the podium.
Okay, thank you. Should I go there or here?
I think you're gonna...
I can sit here.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, good afternoon. This is my first time to come to Korea, but I think I learned to say 안녕하세요. Okay, it is a distinct honor and privilege to be invited to this prestigious event, the 9th Climate Energy Summit in Seoul. My name is Novi Kurnia. I'm an associate professor from Department of Communication Science, as well as a young researcher from the Center for Digital Society in Universitas Gadjah Mada in Yogyakarta, Indonesia. I'd like to thank to my assistant, Sarifah Nur Aini, that also helped me finding the literature for my presentation. So this is this is a little bit about me. They already, presented later, but I will come to this slide, yeah. When I will start with a few numbers that reveal the complexity of public perception around climate change. Globally, between 6% and 23% of people either don't believe climate change is happening, or they are simply unsure. On top of that, 22 to 38% believe that humans are only partly responsible for it. That's based on the data from CAAD 2022. But there is also reason for optimism. A recent Ipsos survey in 2024 shows that 69% of people worldwide believe small everyday action can make a real difference in addressing the crisis. So what does this tell us? On one hand, it shows a genuine readiness to act, but on the other hand, it highlights how confusion and misinformation continue to shape public understanding in powerful ways. And this confusion is not accidental. A research by Kohn and colleagues in 2021 identifies several persistent narratives used to spread climate disinformation, such as global warming is not happening, human greenhouse gases are not causing global warming, climate impacts are not bad, climate solution won't work, the climate movement and climate science are unreliable. This is the example. Those claims may sound familiar, but they are deeply damaging. They erode trust in science, weaken public resolve, and delay the urgent action that's needed. That's why, alongside our effort to address the climate crisis, we must also confront an information crisis, because how we communicate, how we educate and build trust will ultimately shape the world's ability to respond. So this is some key factors and approaches when we're talking about climate misinformation or disinformation. We can see that we are highlight several key dimensions that shape our understanding of the climate disinformation challenge. First, we are witnessing a rapid spread of false and misleading climate information, especially online. This is not only confuses the public, but also slows down the action and undermine trust in scientific expertise. Second, the role of digital platform is crucial. They must be more accountable for the content they amplify, while still upholding the public interest and safeguarding democratic freedom. Artificial intelligence offers new tools to detect misinformation, but its use must be transparent and ethical. At the same time, digital literacy is essential. Helping people recognize and question false content is a long-term investment in societal resilience. And moving forward, we need collaborative efforts between government, tech companies, and communities to build healthier information system. Importantly, this must be done with a global perspective, ensuring that the responses to mis or disinformation are context-sensitive and inclusive for diverse social, political, and economic realities. Let me now share what I already done in 2 years ago when we are conducting research with my team at CFDS UGM titled Tackling Climate Misinformation in Indonesia. We began with an online survey involving 2,401 Indonesian respondents at 17 to 1969. The result revealed several striking trends. First, an overwhelming 98%, almost 10% respondents believe that social media is the primary source of climate misinformation. Second, 24.2% agreed with a conspiracy theory suggesting that climate change is an artificial phenomenon created by global elites, highlighting how deeply some narratives have taken root. Interestingly, while 74% respondents said that they feel confident to identify misinformation, only 20% who act to create counter-narrative content in response. This points to a significant gap between awareness and action. In addition to the survey, we also conducted a content analysis of 123 verified misinformation items related to climate crisis, global warming, and natural disaster, as Indonesia have a lot of problems on natural disaster. We categorize this piece based on their potential harm, ranging from satire to parody, which may be less damaging, to fabricated content, which carries the highest risk of harm to public understanding and response. Together, this finding underscore the urgent need for targeted intervention, especially on digital platforms, to address the specific forms and channels through while climate misinformation spreads in Indonesian context. So what about in Korea as well as in Global South? So actually with my limited knowledge, I apologize if I'm mistaken, but it seems that in South Korea, public awareness and concern about climate change is generally higher than in many other countries. However, research by Hyun Jong and colleagues suggests that South Koreans are more concerned about local environmental issues such as air pollution and waste management than about climate change itself. This points to the need for more integrated public communication strategies. In Global South, climate misinformation and misinformation present a different set of challenges. First, there is significant information disparity, often driven by limited access to accurately, timely information. Journalists and the general public may lack the resources to verify claims, allowing inaccuracies to spread unchecked. Second, there is a lack of validation mechanism. Without strong institutional support for fact-checking capacity, false narrative can persist and even gain the legitimacy, especially the virality has become kind of the number one now in a digital world. Additionally, climate discourse is often shaped by narrative from the global north, which tend to prioritize technological solutions and policy frameworks that exclude of marginalized global south perspective. The imbalance results in the international policies that do not fully address the needs of realities of developing nations. More broadly, climate misinformation have emerged as serious global threats. They delay action, weaken trust, polarize public opinion, and erode democratic discourse. So we move to what platform and public interest in dealing with climate misinformation. So this is platform responsibility. I think it's already discussed by the keynote speaker before, but I will repeat it again. So I like to highlight two essential pillars in addressing climate information: platform responsibility and public interest. So regarding platform responsibility, platforms have actually dealing with algorithms that usually what users see, that they can reinforce echo chambers and manipulate public opinion. Content moderation also plays a crucial role in maintaining a healthy and safe online ecosystem. Second, fact-checking as well as labeling are vital. Platforms need to invest in independent verification efforts as well as provide clear warning or misleading content to enhance public awareness and climate literacy. Third, we must focus on the user empowerment by equipping them with tools and media literacy skills. We can foster active participation in combating misinformation, including related with the climate change. Additionally, platforms should prioritize collaboration and accountability, especially in a real-time monitoring efforts to the content. And finally, they must commit to promoting quality information for the accurate science-based climate content. That's the most important. The second one is about the public interest. So this public interest, we have to make sure that there is an equitable digital access. We have also to make sure to strengthen digital literacy, especially in terms of the content governance in Global South and the support of local initiative. So what about actually the opportunities and challenges when we talk about AI? So there are a lot of opportunities and challenges of AI tools in combating climate mis or disinformation. AI tools today offer both significant opportunities and challenges. Let's begin with the opportunities. AI enables automated fact-checking, allowing systems to rapidly compare claims against credible scientific data and generate accurate information. It also can process large volumes of data because big data can process and detect patterns on flags of mis or disinformation. The other opportunities is that content moderation and recommendation system also can be provided by AI. Moreover, AI also can be used to make a public awareness campaign. However, there are also a lot of challenges that related with the kind of the AI in combating climate and misinformation. The first one is technical limitations because AI isn't perfect. AI is not human. It can flag legitimate content as false or fail to detect actual misinformation. Second is the bias in AI models remains a concern. The systems are only as objective as the data they're trained on, which means they can unintentionally reinforce existing bias. The third one is that misinformation strategies are constantly evolving. It means that AI tool must be continually updated to adapt new formats, to adapt narrative, as well as cultural context. Finally, there are ethical concerns. The use of AI for content moderation raises difficult questions about free speech, transparency, and accountability. This topic was also the focus of my presentation at UNESCO Digital Learning Week 2024 in last September in 2024. I emphasized that while digital tools, especially AI, hold a great promise in combating climate misinformation, they must be deployed thoughtfully as well as inclusively. By investing in innovation, building digital literacy, and fostering collaboration across actors, we can create real synergies between green and digital transition to ensure our response to climate crisis to become informed, inclusive, and rooted in global or local knowledge. So what about in Indonesia? What's my experience? This is the conditions in Indonesia. As we look at especially in Indonesia, it is clear that digital literacy serves as foundation for combating climate and misinformation. This begins with empowering critical evaluation so that individuals can assess and question the content they consume rather than passively accepting it. It also involves promoting reliable sources of information. We must actively disseminate climate knowledge grounded in scientific evidence through trusted media channels. We need to foster responsible digital citizenship. That means encouraging users to share accurate information, report harmful content, and participate in constructive, respectful online conversations. And importantly, we must nurture collaborative multi-stakeholder programs. By working together, then we can expand our reach and ensure that no one is left behind. Of course, this is not without challenges. Indonesia's graphic scale and diversity present real barriers. Building digital literacy is in a way what is inclusive and sustainable is still a problem for us. Need long-term commitment along with continued investment in education, infrastructure, and cross-sector collaboration. With climate misinformation, Indonesia may not be as prevalent as political or health-related information. It remains an urgent area for intervention. When I spoke at the World Press Freedom Day 2024 in last June or last year, I joined journalists, fact-checkers, and environmental activists to discuss key points. We highlight how climate misinformation hinder climate action, the unique challenge in fact-checking such as content, especially when it comes from both local and global sources. We have import misinformation in climate change, not only product but also information. Several initiatives have already shown promise. For example, faktaiklim.prosa.ai. It is an open source platform complete with chatbot support designed to deliver climate and information with local relevance with Indonesian context. At CFDS UGM, we launched an internet campaign on tackling climate misinformation in 2024. We also had a community-based program involving over 380 participants across Java and Bali, especially the youth people, aimed at building grassroots resilience against climate mis or disinformation. These are small but important steps. Going forward, we need to scale this effort, strengthen partnership, and ensure that digital empowerment is placed at the heart of our climate response. So this is my last slide actually, for carting a path forward remedies and solution. So to conclude, let me outline how we can move forward by adopting a range of approach and solution. First, we must invest in digital literacy and critical thinking, ensuring education and training programs equip people with the skills to analyze and evaluate information effectively. Second, supporting quality journalism and fact-checking is essential. Independent media and robust verification mechanism help quantity that accurate, reliable information that can be shared to public. The third, platform accountability and transparency need to be prioritized. Promoting clear and effective regulation on digital platform will help curb misinformation and build trust. I think government also can take action into this step. Fourth, we should leverage artificial intelligence using advancing tools to detect misinformation and amplify credible counter-narrative. We need counter-narrative. And finally, this effort requires multi-stakeholder collaboration. Government, tech companies, civil society, academia, and international organizations must work together in partnership. All these strategies align with the concept of inclusive digital or green digital action. This means integrating social inclusion, environmental sustainability, and digital transformation. Key elements here including developing digital climate solution, collaborate for impact, justice, and digital equity, as well as policy and literacy drive change and global local synergy. So I think we meet here to be part of the global local synergy. And the other thing that I can share, I can briefly share an update about a free online multimedia course titled Navigating Climate Information with Media and Information Literacy that will be launched soon. This course is developed by UNESCO in partnership with the Mahatma Gandhi Institute of Education for Peace and Sustainable Development. It's part of UNESCO Global Roadmap for Information as a Public Good in the face of the environmental crisis. So this online course targeted to general public and will take between 3 to 5 hours. Yeah. In this course, I'm part of the expert. The objective is to equip citizens with media and information literacy skill and competencies needed to better understand the climate crisis. So you can check the UNESCO website and it will be launched soon. So this is actually my last slide and this is some of the reference, but in top of all, this is my presentation and I hope I pronounce it well. Kamsahamnida.
Thank you very much. Actually, time is running, so I hope our second speaker can finish his talk within 20 minutes. So let me invite Vice President Daniel Castro, who will talk about recalibrating concerns about the AI's energy use.
Great. It's a pleasure to be here today. As introduced, I'm Daniel Castro. I'm Vice President of ITIF, which is a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank based out of Washington, D.C. I work on a variety of issues related to digital policy, including a lot around AI. And last year, I wrote this report called Rethinking the Concerns Around AI's Energy Use, where I dug into some of the claims around the energy impact that AI has, want to really dig into the studies and what they show, and what we've learned in the subsequent years since they've been published and kind of put that into context. So in this presentation, I'll walk through some of the ideas in that paper. I'm also going to include some newer information. This paper was published January of 2024, so we've obviously had some new data. I've added some of that to the slides, and I'm going to be publishing something next week that has a little bit more, and I'll talk about that as well. So if you just see the headlines around AI, we see a lot of headlines like this, right? That training a single AI model can emit as much carbon as 5 cars in their lifetime. Or AI could need as much electricity as an entire country. My favorite one is this Wall Street Journal one where it has this robot dinosaur just tearing apart the grid. And when you see these headlines, it really makes you think that AI will have a hugely significant impact on our energy use. And what I want to do in this presentation is talk about what we know and what we don't know about those types of claims. So what's interesting is that we've seen a lot of claims like this before about digital technologies. So in 1999, there was this highly read Forbes article that said, dig more coal, the PCs are coming. It made the claim that half of the electric grid will be powering the digital internet economy within the next decade. And it said, every time you buy a book online from Amazon, a lump of coal is burned somewhere in America. These really, scary headlines. And so this was a very concrete prediction, right? Half of the electric grid will be powering the digital internet economy within the next decade. Well, that was 1999. Fast forward over a decade later, and we see that in 2014, data centers in the United States consumed an estimated 70 billion kilowatt hours, which was about 1.8% of total US electricity consumption. So 1.8, not half, significant difference in the prediction. Then what else do we see? A couple years later, the Internet of Things, a lot of people were talking about this, all these connected devices and the data being generated and consumed by these devices. Again, major predictions. ICT could create up to 3.5% of global emissions by 2020, surpassing aviation and shipping, and up to 14% by 2040. Very specific prediction that ICT could use 10% of the world's electricity by 2020 and 20% by 2025. Again, we've now passed the 2020 date, so we have the facts. ICT represented 1.4% of global greenhouse gas emissions in 2020, and it was about 3.9% of electricity consumption. So again, the estimates and the predictions were quite far off. Again, we saw another one around a report about climate crisis, the unsustainable use of online video. The prediction here was the emissions from watching 30 minutes of Netflix video is the same as driving almost 4 miles, or 1.6 kilograms of CO2 emissions. And there was also a lot of concerns about streaming music. The electricity consumption of streaming Despacito, the very popular Justin Bieber song, 7 billion times on YouTube was equivalent to 900 gigawatt hours. The claims just didn't match reality. The carbon footprint needed to do that, if you kind of extrapolate it out, would have been more than what Google was doing for all of YouTube at the time. So the International Energy Agency, took a look at this, and they said, no, streaming a 30-minute show on Netflix was around 0.018 kilograms of CO2, so about 88 times smaller than what that estimate said. Unfortunately, as we see with a lot of misinformation, the fact check on it received a lot less attention than the kind of scary headlines about streaming. So let's come back to AI. So the early AI energy estimates were wrong too, and unfortunately, these are the estimates that we see used again and again in the media. So the main study that has been done that is often cited is this Struble 2019 study. And the claim was that the energy to train an AI model is equivalent to 300 round-trip flights from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States. So if you dig into that paper, a few things are true. One, that claim, the paper was looking at lots of different AI models, but that claim was about one very specific type of AI model. It's called network architecture search. It's one of the most computationally complex problems you can do, and it's not the same as the generative AI or the LLMs that pretty much everyone else was talking about when they were citing this. So first of all, the starting point is this citation is basically not about LLMs. It's not about the kind of regular generative AI that most people are thinking about. The second problem is that the estimate was also just fundamentally wrong because it made a lot of false assumptions. The research was completely legitimate for the time, but a couple years later, the research that were actually involved in the specific models that she looked at in this paper released additional information about their model, and it just turned out that the predictions were wrong because of the assumptions that she had in there. The actual emissions were about 90 times smaller overall. So we also know that over time, we've been able to look at the progress in different AI models. And I've tried to capture as many of the models that are out there today And we see a few things. I mean, one thing is certainly true. As models have developed over time, they've gotten larger, and larger models use more energy, which is one of the fundamental concerns that people have. But it's also true that growth is not necessarily completely in parallel. So, for example, GPT-3 was released, I think it was 2021. It had about 179 billion parameters and used a certain amount of energy. If you look at the GLAM model that Google released about 2 years later, it had significantly more parameters, so it was about 7 times more parameters, but about a third of the energy cost to train it. So just because we see a growth in parameters doesn't necessarily mean that we're seeing that same growth in energy consumption. Another important factor here is that energy consumption doesn't always tie to carbon emissions. Many of the companies, especially many of the large tech companies in the United States, have made net zero commitments that they're already fulfilling. So for example, when you look at Meta and the Llama models that it's produced, it's producing these at net zero because it's using carbon offsets for these models, and then it's releasing them publicly for others to build on top of. Others, when you look at the carbon emissions, the variation that you see between different models has to do with where they actually train the models. So deciding where to place data centers and how efficient those data centers are can have a huge impact on the efficiency of the model. Another fact that we've learned since then is that most of the early studies were focused on the training cost of AI models. How much does it cost to build one of these models? And it turns out that most of the energy consumption is really around inference. And so a lot of policymakers are actually paying attention to the wrong part of the equation. We should be talking about AI and energy cost, and whether we're talking about training or inference, both matter. But actually the bigger issue is going to be around inference. So 65% to 90% of AI's energy cost is from inference, so it's from using it. And it does vary based on the different tasks. So text classification, image classification, these are much less energy intensive. Image generation, video generation, much higher generation. And of course, the costs vary significantly by model. So the question, of course, becomes, well, are inference costs surging out of control? In Joule in 2023, the claim was made the worst case scenario suggests that Google's AI alone could consume as much electricity as a country such as Ireland, 29.3 terawatt hours per year. The reality is that Google's total global energy consumption was only 25 terawatt hours in 2023. So that's all the energy consumption of the entire company, not just of its data centers, not just of AI. What we've seen is that data centers comprise a fragment of Google's energy consumption. It has grown over time as the company has gotten larger, but actually the component that's reserved for machine learning has been actually fairly consistent over time, even though it's had this growth. It's been about 10 to 15% of its total energy use. Part of the reason for this is that we see improvements not only in accuracy over time, but also in efficiency over time in terms of the hardware. So on this slide, I have listed some of the image recognition algorithms, machine learning algorithms that have been popular over the years. And you see the score, the quality of these improve over time. But what's interesting is if you look at those last two columns, that's basically the energy consumption for applying these models. And it's gone down in every case over a year because we've seen the introduction of new chips. So both we're seeing the advancement of the technology, obviously, in terms of quality. We're seeing the advancement of the technology in terms of efficiency of these models, but we're also seeing the advancement of hardware. So even if you stick with an existing model, as hardware improves over the time, the energy efficiency improves over time as well. So what do these estimates generally get wrong? Well, first, they often ignore the economic considerations. So for example, a lot of the predictions, for example, the ones around Google, would require Google to make $100 billion investment in chips, in addition to tens of billions of dollars in operational cost related to the energy. So in many cases, these predictions, the extrapolations of the energy use from AI, just simply aren't financially feasible. They're not practical, and we know that we live in economic reality that we can't expect companies to spend that much on these areas, so that will naturally constrain the uses and what they do here. The second kind of mistake that's made in these extrapolations is that it's assuming consistent rates of improvements in AI models. So it assumes that if you double the size of an AI model, you're going to double the accuracy, and so you're doubling the energy use. And that's just not what we see play out in reality. In many cases, many of these models are actually reaching kind of peak performance. So you look at some of the test benchmarks that are being used. Can they pass a medical school test, for example? And they're getting pretty close to human accuracy. So we're not going to see, doubling and tripling of the model sizes at this point. We're going to see more refinement of the models. And we actually saw that, of course, with DeepSeek and China's AI model, where many of the improvements there were about efficiency and using this mix of experts model where, they had a very large model, but they were only activating parts of it, and so it was significantly more efficient. And then the last part is that we often discount future innovations that improve energy efficiency. So if you look at global data centers, between 2010 and 2018, the amount of chips in these data centers grew by like 550%. The amount of data storage grew by something like 2,400%. But the amount of energy used only grew by about 6 to 7%. So we had massive growth in the global data centers in terms of capacity and in terms of storage, but only very small growth in energy. And that's, of course, because of the efficiencies that we see as there are more innovations in everything from cooling and power to the chips themselves. All of that to say is I want to make crystal clear that my point is not that energy use isn't growing from AI. It is growing. It's growing, it is significant, but we need to put that into context, and we need to not, kind of overestimate this. I think the best estimate we have right now from IEA, it says that data centers account for approximately 1.5% of global electricity consumption as of last year. It's also important to note that while it is growing, less than 10% of the expected demand growth between 2024 and 2030 is expected to come from data centers. So the key drivers of electricity demand are industrial output, electrification, electric vehicles, and then heating and cooling. So yes, data center growth will continue, but it's not the primary driver of this demand. This slide we actually looked at earlier, definitely data centers are concentrated in certain regions. So this growth in demand is having high impacts in certain areas. It's having a high impact in certain regions where we see a lot of data centers, and it's putting stress on those grids. And that's one of the reasons we're seeing, the development and the movement of data centers to these secondary markets. Because they can, put new energy resources up faster, or maybe they need new space, or they're not competing as much for certain energy demands. One of the other interesting things we're seeing, though, is that as we're seeing this move to secondary markets, we're also seeing this interest in AI and concern about access to energy to power these data centers, leading to new investment in potential in renewable resources. So, for example, Microsoft is helping spin that up 3 Mile Island to do nuclear energy generation in the United States. They've had a lot of focus as well on solar and other clean energy sources. We're seeing this in China with a focus on hydropower. Lots of interest in basically how we can use renewable to do this, especially coming from companies that have made these net zero commitments. All right, so what are the key takeaways here? First, we should continue to think about how we can actually use AI to address climate change. The most important, I think, takeaway here is that when we hear AI, we should be concerned about the energy use, but we shouldn't be overly concerned about the energy use. We should be thinking about where are the opportunities here, because there is still a lot, right? It's about grid optimization, climate monitoring, using AI in smart cities, precision agriculture, various consumer tools, using it for home management, all of these opportunities, and this needs to be at the forefront of what policymakers are thinking about, because many of these changes are not going to be driven by the market. They're going to be driven by a policy that we take to advance adoption of AI. Second, we do need to be thinking about the energy impact of AI, and one of the most important things we can do is develop energy transparency standards. Right now, when companies that are voluntarily releasing information about the energy efficiency of their models, they're kind of making up how they disclose this information. There's not agreed upon formulas for how you make those calculations. And that makes it very hard to have good information into the marketplace so that the users of these AI models can make responsible decisions about which model they use. They can actually make a decision to say, well, I'm going to use this model, not that model, because it is more energy efficient. But we can't do that if we don't have good benchmarks that are reliable and informative for the market. And then, of course, while some companies are making these disclosures, not everyone are making disclosures today. And so it's important that we get more voluntary commitments from companies to start making disclosures when they release their models about both the energy consumption involved in training, but also the energy consumption involved in inference. So again, the users can make responsible decisions, not just based on cost, but based on a number of other factors about the energy efficiency of their models. A fourth point is that we should be considering the unintended consequences of various AI regulations on energy use. So, I know there's a lot of concerns around AI, and I actually spend a lot of my time talking about, how we can regulate and manage the risk related to AI. We have to be careful that we consider all the different equities. Many of the proposals that I see around, for example, addressing privacy, for example, around AI, involve adding new layers of processing. When you add new layers of processing, that's adding more energy consumption. Sometimes it's doubling, tripling, 10x or more, because you're not just, now making one request to the model, you're actually making multiple requests. And, we have to think about the energy efficiency of these various guardrails and how we're also optimizing those. My point is not to say we shouldn't do them, but we need to think about the energy impact as well. And then finally, coming back to government itself and using AI to decarbonize government operations. Again, really huge opportunities, and it's something where government can lead, and it can lead by example, by thinking, not just about this question about, for example, we hear a lot about sovereign AI, are we using AI made in our country, domestically, but also asking this question about, are we using energy efficient AI, are we using green AI, and what are we doing to help promote more of that? So I'll pause there. I have my contact information, and the report that I mentioned is also freely available on my website. So happy to share that with anyone if that's of interest. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Vice President Castro. I have two questions to each speaker. So let me start with Daniel Castro first. It was very interesting to read your presentation because you started the AI's energy consumption. There was a lot of misinformation. So you said because of innovations of this energy saving of AI sector, the energy consumption of AI is not that high as we are afraid of. And then you emphasize the benefits of AI to process and to predict the forecasting, the how we can mitigate the climate change responses. And here, still, it's not that persuasive yet how we can have an energy efficient AI data center. I don't know if you have heard the South Korean big business SK and Amazon are going to build AI data center in Ulsan because around the Ulsan city there are many power plants, and the SK has LNG burning power plant around that area. So because of this sovereign AI issue, I'm sure our government would be eager to have another data center in the future. However, I think it's inevitable in a sense for South Korea because we need to develop AI. However, we are concerned about this energy consumption causing by all the multiple data center. South Korea is already number 7 in the world in terms of greenhouse gas emission. So if we burn more energies, and our rank can be higher, and our renewable energy is very low, less than, I think, 7-8% something. So how can we push these private companies to voluntarily save energy as much as possible? Is there that kind of mechanism in USA? Then tell us.
It's a great question, and I think we have to think about what part of the problem we're solving here. Even if we get AI as perfectly efficient and green as we want, we still have to deal with climate change. We still have to deal with the cost right now of clean energy being higher than the cost of dirty energy. And so we need innovation in clean energy, right? We have to continue to figure out how do we lower the cost of deploying solar, deploying wind, thinking about small modular reactors, thinking about other nuclear options. How can we get low cost, high quality clean energy? And so the important thing there is that using energy for AI, it's the same electricity that's used to power our lights, to power our heating and cooling. It's not dirtier because it's being used for AI, right? That energy use isn't any different. So we can't solve it just for AI. We have to solve it outside of AI. What I think AI allows is it allows opportunities to address climate change, very uniquely, whether it's, some of these areas like smart cities, looking at managing, natural resources, all of those things, as well as the fact that it's driving investment in clean energy from some of these companies, because they want to basically guarantee their access to energy. They're willing to make new investments in energy that wouldn't otherwise be happening, and government can help push for that to be, clean energy. But this is where I think we have to look at the bigger picture and say, for example, if every company, regardless of the sector, are making, net zero commitments or making certain, caps on their emissions, then when they use AI, they will make smarter decisions about, whether they're using efficient AI or less efficient AI. And that will be a good thing for the market. That will push companies to figure out, well, are we using an efficient model? Are we using an efficient data center? And it might be that in some cases, if South Korea, for example, really wants to pursue its clean energy goals, maybe it shouldn't build data centers here, and it should be using data centers in other locations. And that's one of those compromises it might need to make specifically for this area. And so the question, there's lots of solutions to questions about data sovereignty that don't require building a data center physically within the country. Other countries, for example, have created what they've called data embassies, where basically they build a data center in another country, and just like an embassy built in another country has certain sovereignty rights, they can do something similar for the data centers abroad. And so I think, if the goal is energy efficiency, that might be a solution in this case, is to say, well, maybe we're not going to build a data center physically in South Korea, but we're going to find a partner, maybe in Europe, maybe in the Middle East, and we're going to have our data center there, and it's going to be much more efficient for us. So that's going to help us meet our goals, but we're going to do it in partnership where there's a legal recognition that we still have full rights to this data, that it's recognized as still being sovereign AI.
Thank you very much. My second question is about the global South and North division about AI technology. I think I read the New York Times, I think the day before yesterday, they were showing the AI data center map in the world, and more than 150 countries do not have any AI center. And most of AI hubs are concentrated in USA and China. And if you just count the number of AI data center, I think USA, EU, and China, and small numbers in Asia, right? So if, let's say, you emphasize the benefits of AI technology to combat the climate change, right? So let's say I'm a country leader of a global south, and I like to use AI technology to combat our problem, climate change, right? But I don't have an AI access. Then how this AI data center in USA, for example, can help them? And there is no global governance mechanism about helping these countries in need. And most of the AI centers are private, the global tech companies, right? Their model is based on profit-seeking business model. Then how can you, encourage them to help them?
Another great question, and yes, it was a good article in the New York Times. I agree, people should read it. I think there's a few things here. First of all, many of these data centers can be accessed via the cloud. So, if you have access to the internet, you can use these data centers. The question is really more about cost. Do people have the funds to buy access to it? And that's something where, sometimes we need government subsidies, especially if you're talking about academic access to using AI and using AI for scientific research. We probably need more government funding to support access to that. But it's also important to remember that AI isn't just about the large computing. It's not just about the biggest data centers. Many of the applications, especially when you're not talking about building models, but about deploying them, it's about inference. It can be run on edge computers. So it can be run on anything from a laptop or mobile device to even smaller wearables. Right? And so when you look at some of the most downloaded models, the most used models, they're not the largest, most accurate ones. They're actually the smaller ones. So for example, the smaller Llama model is one of the most deployed models because it's small and efficient and you can deploy it anywhere. And that lowers the cost if you're running it on a server, but it also makes it feasible to run it on your own computer, on your own device. And so I think this is where it's important that you really have to kind of look deep. Yes, if you want to, build an AI service that everyone on their mobile phone is going to access in your country, yeah, you need your own data center to do that. That's a lot of compute. But if you're talking about many different applications of AI, including commercial applications, industrial applications of AI, that can be run on a computer that people already have. And so there isn't a barrier to accessing that today. And so, that's another area where we have to, continue to kind of, I wouldn't say it's misinformation, but it's, it's still education that people need about where the opportunities are and how they can pursue it. Because, the opportunity to use AI is massive. And it doesn't require massive compute to use it. It just requires a computer.
Thank you very much. I think it's a good time to ask about this information to Professor Kanya. I studied disinformation in case of South Korea. I think there is always a great debate how we are going to regulate disinformation, but regulating disinformation is not that popular. It's very difficult to punish users, even though we have certain laws to punish. And if we like to levy fines to social media that are disseminating disinformation, they usually like self-regulation rather than the government regulations. So, and it's very, slow to react to disinformation. So for that matter, I think digital literacy is very important. And you've been working in Indonesia to raise digital literacy educations. Can you share your experience more?
Okay, so actually my main job is lecturer, but my main other job is digital literacy activist. Yeah, when I come home from returning my PhD study from Flinders University in South Australia, actually my thesis is about women film director in Indonesian cinema. But when I come home in 2014, I see until 2016, I see that there are a lot of problems in digital society, especially on mis and disinformation, not only on climate change, but also in politics and health, as well as environment in general and other issues. That's why in 2016, I meet with my other lecturers from other university in Indonesia. We are kind of intrigued to make a communities. So in 2017, I co-found JAPLID, Indonesian Digital Literacy Activists, to have a lot of programs on digital literacy. We focus not only on research and publication, but we also have a lot of training programs as well as advocacy programs, not only to the users, but also I join into some other communities, Cyberkreasi, the Digital Literacy National Movement, as well as Koalisi Damai, Democratization of Coalition in Indonesia, because, and as well in UGM, yeah, where, my institution, we not only try to leverage the digital literacy index of Indonesian citizen, but also we also have a lot of efforts to kind of have a high-level meeting, not only with the government, but also to the digital platform. When we talking about how disinformation regulate in Indonesia, I think similar, yeah. Although maybe Indonesia is more on legal or non-legal for the content that considered as harmful, including disinformation. So it's ruled by the information and technology law, but also it's ruled by the penal law. So it's not easy, as my research before in regulating harmful content in Indonesia. Sometimes the marginal groups are become the victim of the freedom of expression. So sometimes the kind of the boundary between disinformation and freedom of expression is very limited. For example, in Indonesia, some marginal people are journalists and human rights activists, LGBTQ communities, and kind of subculture of religious in Indonesia. Whatever they put in social media, although it's not disinformation, sometimes it report to become disinformation or other content negative. So there are still a lot of homeworks actually in Indonesia, although there are a lot of effort too, but still a lot of work to deal with misinformation and disinformation, especially in climate change. That's why in my research in CFDS, when we see the content, it's not only mis or disinformation in climate change, but also related with environment and disaster. And Indonesia, disinformation regarding climate change sometimes is associated with religious issue and political issue. For example, with religious issue, there is a disinformation on the kind of about the natural disaster, the longsor or landslide, the gempa bumi or earthquake, the banjir or flood, and the tsunami. So this disinformation associated to LGBT communities that still sometimes become a problem because most of Indonesians are homophobic, for example, as well as politics. For example, there is a flood in Jakarta, the capital city, is then related to the new governor, for example. So it seems that there are local contexts. That's why AI tools sometimes cannot be used fully. In my interview with some fact checker last year, before I'm going to Paris, then I interviewed some of fact checkers and journalists. They use AI for about 30 or 40% because the AI tools produced from Western or the developed country, they cannot read the local issues or local context. So in digital literacy programs in Indonesia, sometimes we have to deal with the local context. One of my experience, I think, related with the the keynote speaker is the one campaign conducted by JAPLID in 2020. At that time, we combat disinformation and misinformation that related to pandemic. We use the main program or the main message into 46 languages in Indonesia, one Indonesian, one Mandarin, and 40 for the rest in local language. Although it's not enough because we have 700 something local language, but at least it helped a lot for people, especially in the rural area. So a lot of perspective that we can use, but we have to think and we have to deal with also the local context.
I think I remember during the pandemic time, people usually who spread disinformation about the Corona-19 was, they claimed, scientists and medical doctors. So it's very funny. And some are fake, but some are really, they are medical doctors, but arguing against the WHO's recommendation. And then sometimes this climate change disinformations kind of intertwined with ideological and political disinformation. So let's say, even though I believe in climate change, man-made climate change, then certain politicians I support deny it. I tend to subscribe. And especially when the political environment is polarized, you tend to buy either side of a camp. And is that kind of phenomenon, the political factor, influence the Indonesian voters? And you mentioned about the governor, right, during the natural disaster. But let's say during the election time or political debate between party members, is there any that kind of a combined effect?
Yes, I think so. Because in Indonesia, the political factors as well as religious, as I said before, is very intervening in our daily life, including in our digital realm. Yeah. So when there is a kind of the general election for president in 2019 and last one in 2024, all the hoaxes are kind of incorporated into several areas. Politics with climate information, politics with health, politics with other issues. And it's not easy to deal with. So there are a lot of effort actually to kind of make a agreement, especially on the committee of the general election. But it's not easy to surveillance all the misinformation and disinformation, especially in social media, because there are a lot mis and disinformation in social media. That's why among digital literacy activists in Indonesia, including me in Cyberkreasi, in Jablidi, and in Koalisi Damai, as well as in CFDS, we have a lot of effort to go to the users, not only in the high-level meeting, but go to the users. For example, I just finished one of my project with 25 academicians from 20 cities in Indonesia. We have training for AI for academicians in 25 universities in Indonesia. It's not enough, but at least we try to learn about how AI, in the one hand, can be used to detect misinformation, but also in another hand, AI also can be used to produce mis or disinformation. That's why a lot of work that have to be done is not only formal in university as well as in schools, but also in general society. Indonesia itself have 4 years programs that leverage into Indonesian society. It called Makin Cakap Digital, or to be good or better in using digital media. It's conducted in 4 years, and I become the coordinator and also one of the author for the 4 modules. So it consists of 4 points. The first one is skill, the second one is safety and culture and ethics. So it's part of our effort, not only the government, but also academician, digital literacy activists, the the technology platform and other stakeholders to be part in the, the big effort in Indonesian overall. I forget invited thousands of people in Indonesia, but as we just changed the president, the program then paused. Yeah, I don't know whether it will be later on continued or not. So, yeah, that's the problem. Yeah, sometimes when we have a different government, the policy can be different. But in grassroots communities, we still have a lot of digital literacy programs conducted at the moment, including to the marginal citizen, the senior citizen, children, women, and people in the, remote areas in Indonesia.
Thank you very much. I think we have about 5 minutes left. So my last question will go to Mr. Daniel Castro. I think you are essentially arguing we need the AI to combat AI-based, AI-created disinformation. So we are using AI machine to combat AI-created disinformation, right? I'm sure you are talking to the government policymakers in USA and also business sector of AI industry and also social media, big tech industries, and also politicians. Is this kind of argument using AI to combat AI-created climate change, disinformation, is it well accepted in the USA?
Well, I think in the U.S. context, there's been a lot of concern about the role that digital platforms play in policing information. And what we saw over the past elections is that the platforms have, they are trying to be politically neutral. They recognize that they're facing complaints or requests from different political actors, some saying they want them to take down more information and others saying they want to allow other information to stay online, information that many people would say is disinformation, right? We saw this in the context of COVID, we've seen this in the context of elections, international affairs, foreign affairs, this comes up again and again. So I don't think policymakers in the US or even in the US more generally expect to see AI as the solution to misinformation. And I also want to be clear, that's not what I would say either. I think you have to start with one, the individual. So I think this digital literacy, media literacy, AI literacy, that's all part of the solution. I do think we also have to recognize that misinformation, disinformation predates AI, it predates all of this, and it comes from, and it has come from, and it continues to be amplified by existing media. And so solving those issues will be important as well. You have to look at the incentive structures. Why are these groups promoting this misinformation? Well, they're getting something out of it, and can we fix those issues? I think those are all important as well. But I do think there are other technical solutions that are very important. One proposal we often see is mandatory labels for AI-generated information. The problem with these labels is that you're talking about basically watermarks. Watermarks can be, one, they can be removed, and two, when you're asking the bad actors to watermark their stuff, their output, they're the ones with the most incentive not to do it. So, it's very hard to do. But we can change the information environment, and this is where I think technical solutions around content provenance, digital provenance marks can be very useful. So just like in the past, when early days of the internet, everyone learned when you're going to buy something online, you look in your web browser and you look for the little padlock that says this is a secure site. That was a signal to us that this is a trusted site. Or at least that it was a signal that you could trust the connection. It might actually be a malicious site, but you could trust the connection. In the early days of the internet, that's what you looked for. If you've looked at recent web browsers, they actually got rid of that because they said the expectation is that all sites use SSL or TLS, and now you're warned on a site that doesn't have that. That's what I think we need to be doing for information in the information environment. We should be now looking for signals like content provenance that says, not that this is true or false, but where it came from. Did this come from a trusted source, New York Times, government agency? And if you don't see that information on there, you might still be able to trust it, but you should look at it more skeptically. And eventually, we should get to an environment where information that doesn't have content provenance is flagged. and you're saying, well, wait a second, why doesn't this have that there? Or why is it coming from this untrusted source? And so I think we really need to be focusing on how do we change the information environment in which we work so that we can have digital literacy education campaigns and methods that are more effective. And so that's where I think policy should focus on, is how do we get there? I think the challenge, of course, is that many people benefit from misinformation, and so there's not always incentives to change that right now.
Thank you very much. I think it's time to wrap up. I think AI is a wonderful compute power, so it can heal very difficult disease, and it can help a lot of things, including climate change mitigation. But at the same time, all the AI companies are essentially the private sector big tech companies. So I think both government, intergovernment organizations, and especially civil society groups and media like Today, who is hosting this forum, should be very alert about how we can control the AI to make sure the human can control the AI. So I think we should close this session by thanking to Mr. Castro and Professor Konya. Thank you very much.